Hello everybody, this is Naya from DoSpace, and today will be a special presentation on the history of computer programming. So let's get started. In the beginning, ever since the invention of Charles Babbage's difference engine in 1882, in 1822, the computers have been required as a means of instructing them to perform a specific task. This means is known as a programming language that we see today. Computer languages were first composed of a series of steps to wire a particular program. In time, these morphed into series of steps keyed into the computer, then executed. Later, these languages acquired advanced features such as logical branching and object orientation. The computer language of the last 50 years has come in two stages. The first major languages, and the second major languages, which are being used today. Now, in the beginning, Charles Babbage difference machine could only be made to execute tasks by changing the gears, which is execute by the calculations, which you can guess, but at that time was pretty difficult. Thus, the earliest form of a computer language was physical motion. Try doing an upgrade of that. Eventually, physical motion was replaced by electrical signals when the U.S. government built the ENIAC in 1942. It followed many of the same principles of Babbage's machine and hence could only be programmed by pressing switches and renewing the entire system for each new program or calculation. However, over time, this proved to be extremely tedious. And now, the first concept in 1945, John von Neumann was working at the Institute for Advanced Study, where he developed two important concepts that directly affected the path of computer programming languages. The first concept would be known as a shared program technique. This technique stated that the actual computer hardware should be simple and not needed to be hand-wired for each program. Instead, complex instructions should be used to control the simple wire, allowing it to be reprogrammed much easier. And the second concept was also extremely important to the development of programming languages, and this was called, and von Neumann called it, conditional control transfer. This idea gave rise to the notion of subroutines or small blocks of code that could be jumped into any order, instead of a single set of chronologically ordered steps for the computer to take. The second part of the idea stated that computer code should be able to branch based on logical statements such as if, expression, then, and looped for such as with a for statement. Now what exactly is conditional control transfer? This gave rise to the idea of libraries, which are really blocks of code that can be used over and over again. So those ones and zeros, that's pretty much the premise of that. Now, the third concept was started in 1949, a few short years after von Neumann's work. This was called the language shortcode. It was the first computer language for electronic devices, and this required the programmer to change its statements into ones and twos by hand, which is what I just described earlier, the ones and twos. Still, this was the first step into the complex languages of today. In 1951, Grace Hooper wrote the first computer program, AO. Now, this was a compiler, which is a program that turns the language statements into zeros and ones for the computer to understand. And this led to faster programming, as the programmer no longer had to do the work by hand, which is a good thing. And upgrading that would have been a nightmare back then. And now to the programming languages. In 1957, the first of the major languages to appear was in the form of Fortran. Its name stands for Formula Translating System, This language was designed by IBM for scientific computing. The components were very simple and provided the programmer with low-level access to the computer innards. Today, this language would be considered restrictive, as it only includes if, do, or go to statements. But at the time, this was a very big step. The basic type of data in use today got their start from this program, which includes the logical variables, true or false, in integer, real, and double precision numbers. Now, in the next video, we will talk more about programs.